Shalom. I want to begin by giving all praise and glory to Yahweh, Hashem Yahushai, Waharu Kakadash, double honors to the elders and to the apostles of Great Millstone, and enough respect to the brothers that are out there pushing and spreading the truth to the four corners of the world. Now, through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Hashem Yahushai, Salakia. I'm just going to get into this article. I'm going to post the link in the description so the brothers can get into it. And so it's a lot of information that I think brothers should be aware of when it comes to these Edomites taking control of the earth. And so that basically these Edomites, okay, these more specifically these banking families, these Edomites and the higher powers, they are trying to make us into what's called a serf. Okay, that is the agenda right now. That world order. Okay, and it says a serf is a person who is forced to work on a plot of land, especially during the medieval period when Europe practiced feudalism, when a few lord owned all the land and everyone else had to toil on it. All right. In Europe, between 9th and 15th centuries, large plots of land were ruled by lords who make serfs work the land for the Lord's profit. The Latin root of the word is servus, which literally means slave, but serfs and slaves are not synonymous. There were many kinds of serfs, some of which were indeed slaves, but others were more like employees who had some limited freedom. Either way, a serf's life was a brutal and unpleasant life. Okay, and that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to take over the land. They're trying to take over the people. They're trying to put the MOTB in us, so they can keep tabs on us, own all the lands, and we work on that land. And ultimately, we work for our privileges to live. All right, that's what they're trying to do. They're following Plato's handbook. And Plato was a madman, man. He wrote that a perfect world was a world where the few, ruled over man, and you had the working class, you had the military class, and then you had the lords, the people who decided what was best for the people, the small group of people who decided what was best for the working class, and the military class are the people who enforce rule onto the working class, and they believe in that, and they're doing it, and as far as we can tell, they are prospering in this endeavor. But we thank Yahweh Bashim Yahushai that they're only going to go so far. We are grateful that the Most High has it to where these men are not going to be able to accomplish what they've set their heart out to do. We thank the Most High for that. And once brothers start reading this, brothers will have to understand that when we tell you to put your trust in the Most High, and you don't you don't agree with this, and you think that by your own strength you're going to deliver yourself, you're going to bring salvation onto your household, you're an idiot. Okay, you're a fool, because what these men are doing, they've considered men who have that same thinking as you. They've their strategy, is geared towards addressing men like you. All right. So, and we're going to see how this works, because even farmers, self-sufficient farmers who had their own land, who had their own crops, who had their own animals, have now fallen victim to this monopolization. They are now workers. They are now incapable of what separated themselves from these corporations, from these large um, agriculture corporations. So we begin by reading. It says the current paradigm of food production in much of the modern world typically involves growing food at a mass scale, what is often known as industrial or factory farming, while focusing on maximizing production and profit and minimizing costs. This intensive agriculture often involves the heavy use of toxic pesticides and genetically engineered crops, and we're going to get into this. Okay, these are one of the many ways where they have power over us. Genetically engineered crops. So we're going to get into it. It says, additionally, in the United States, nearly every aspect of the industrial food animal production system is highly concentrated and controlled by just few mega producers. According to a 2019 report from Open Market titled Food and Power, addressing monopolization in powerful system, nearly all of the seeds and pesticides and herbicide purchased by farmers come from a handful of big agricultural corporations. The report states that for the past 2 decades, increased consolidations has coincided with the prices of farm inputs increasing faster than the prices farmers receive their crops. Seeds are often designed to terminate or fail to germinate after one harvest, forcing farmers to purchase new seeds each season. So these devils, they have it to where now seeds don't work as how they're supposed to work. You know, in order to have control of the farming of the farming world, they give seeds that grow after one harvest. So if you had an orange tree, you planted that, and you were thinking of cutting that seed from that orange and replanted it, it's not gonna work. It doesn't work. That's what they've made. That's how they've revolutionized the agriculture. You know, let's see. Um, get into another example. There's a lot of information, and my intention is not to read all of them. It's just to give you just show you how interesting this thing is, and I want brothers to read it. Okay. Um, let me see. Get it right now. Right. So it says the cattle industry is the single largest segment of American agriculture by value, and roughly select it, and roughly one third of all farms in the U.S. Um, raise beef cattle. So, I'm distracted by some brothers. Forgive me. It says the cattle industry is the single largest segment of American agriculture by value, and roughly one third of all farms in the U.S. raise beef cattle. As recently as the 18, as recently as the 1980s, the beef industry was a model of open, competitive market. Independent ranchers bred and raised their own cattle and sold them to independent feedlots, which fattened the cow and sold them to independent slaughterhouses. At each stage of the process, stakeholders could fetch a fair price in competitive auctions. So for a while, back then, it was good for the farmers. The control of agriculture was diverse. Everybody had a stake in that, and everybody could fetch a fair price. It says, but the beginning of the 1980s, a few large slaughterhouse corporations began to consolidate their hold on all stages of the industry. And just in that decade, the number of cattle feeding corporations in the largest 13 cattle states dropped by 40%. Since 1980, an average of nearly 17,000 cattle ranchers have gone out of business every year. Texas, Nebraska, Kansas, California, and Oklahoma raise 38% of all cattle in the United States, with Texas alone raising 13%. Okay, so today in many regions of the country, ranchers report finding uh, as few as two buyers in the market, and increasingly these buyers do not compete against one another. One result of this consolidation is that the price ranchers receive uh, continues to fall, even though the price consumers pay for beef is rising and beef packers are making record margins, right? And so when you keep reading, it's going to tell you how these um, corporations are in cahoots with the banking families. When you keep reading, it's very, very interesting. It goes into how um, how they bribe officials, how they bribe, you know, government officials, and it actually sheds light on how powerful these men actually are. So another one, it says in many rural communities, large meat processing plants are one of the only employers and expert. This oh In many rural communities, large meat processing plants are one of the only employers and exert this power to suppress unionization, lower or even steal wages, and force employees to work faster in unsafe environments. The Food Chain Workers Alliance report that 65% of meatpacking and food process workers have been injured on the job. Almost 60% of slaughterhouse workers are people of color. And 20, so they got Jake, man. Jake is catching hell over there. Almost 60% of slaughterhouse workers are people of color. In 2015, nearly 30% were born outside of the United States. Many are undocumented, making this workforce particularly vulnerable, less mobile, and more likely to experience workplace harassment, right? So the undocumented, and so their options are very, very limited, which means that what? The men in power over them can put more hell on them because they have no choice. It says, meanwhile, consolidated large-scale corporate growers increasingly outsource farm labor management to contractors. These contractors act as intermediaries between farm workers and growers and thus provide loopholes that enable large scale growers to avoid providing basic employee health and safety protections. More than 50% of agricultural workers earn a sub minimum below poverty wage, you know? So when you read Habakkuk, the second chapter, Verse 5, which says, Yea, also because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlarges his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all